My name is Tasha, and at 35 years old, I thought I had finally earned my place at the head of the table. I am the COO of a major medical supply chain. I pay the mortgage on my parents' house. I put my sister through college. But last week I received a text message that changed everything. "You are not welcome at Thanksgiving this year, Tasha," my sister wrote. "But please transfer $500 for the organic turkey before you go." That was the moment the blindfold finally fell off. They thought they were just uninviting the family scapegoat. They did not realize they were declaring war on their landlord. Before I tell you how I legally evicted my entire family from the comfort of a first-class seat to Seattle, please like and subscribe if you have ever been the bank for people who do not even like you. The glass walls of the conference room on the 42nd floor offered a panoramic view of a gray, windy Chicago November. Inside the room, the atmosphere was even stormier. I was in the middle of a supply chain crisis meeting. 12 people were looking at me, waiting for a decision on the logistics of a shipment stuck in the port of Los Angeles. My voice was steady. My hands were calm. I was in my element. I am good at fixing broken things. I have been fixing things my whole life. But then my phone buzzed against the mahogany table. It was a vibration that usually signaled a catastrophic failure in the warehouse or a call from the CEO. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a notification from the family group chat. My sister Brianna. I felt a small smile touch my lips. I had booked my flight home 3 months ago. I had already wrapped the gifts. A vintage watch for my father Harold, who had been complaining about his old Timex, a spa weekend voucher for my mother Lucille, and for my sister Brianna and her husband Connor, a generous check to help with the new baby. I assumed they were texting about the menu or asking what time my flight landed. I slid the phone closer, keeping one eye on the projection screen where my VP of logistics was shouting about fuel surcharges. I unlocked the screen. The message was long. It was typed out with the precision of a press release. "Tasha, we need to talk about Thanksgiving. Mom and I have been discussing it, and we think it is best if you do not come this year." The air in the conference room seemed to vanish. I blinked, sure that I had misread the words. I read on. "Connor has been feeling very uncomfortable around you lately. You know how sensitive he is about his career transition, and your constant questions about his business make him feel judged. Since this is baby Jack first Thanksgiving, we want a peaceful energy in the house. We want to focus on family unity without the pressure you bring." I stared at the name Connor. My brother-in-law. A 32-year-old man who called himself an entrepreneur but mostly spent his days posting motivational quotes on Instagram and spending my sister's unemployment checks. His career transition had been going on for 5 years. The questions I asked him were basic questions like, "How is the business going?" or "Are you taking on new clients?" Apparently, asking a grown man how he intends to feed his child is now considered creating pressure. "Tasha, are you with us?" My VP of logistics was staring at me. The whole room was staring at me. I looked up. My face was a mask of professional, detached calm. "Yes," I said. "Reroute the shipment through Vancouver. Pay the extra tariff. I will sign off on the budget variance." Meeting adjourned. They filed out relieved. I sat there alone in the silence of the 42nd floor. I looked back at the phone. There was more. "We knew you would understand, Tasha. You are always so busy with work anyway, so this is probably a relief for you. We can do a video call for 5 minutes during dessert so you can see Dad." A video call. During dessert. Like I was a distant relative or a deployed soldier, and not the woman who had paid for the roof they were eating under. I did not cry. That is the thing about being the strong black woman of the family. You lose the ability to cry somewhere between your first paycheck and your third promotion. You just get cold. I sat there replaying the last 10 years in my head. The time I paid off my mother's credit card debt because she was afraid Dad would find out. The time I funded Brianna's wedding because Connor claimed his assets were tied up in crypto. The monthly transfers to the account my father used for groceries. They did not see a daughter or a sister. They saw an ATM that occasionally asked annoying questions. Then a new notification popped up. An email. It was from Connor. He had CC'd my parents and Brianna. The subject line was Thanksgiving logistics. Hi, Tasha. I hope you took the news okay? Brianna is really stressed about hosting, so we are trying to keep costs down while keeping the quality up. Since you are not flying in, you are saving money on the plane ticket, right? We are ordering a free-range heritage turkey and some specific French wines that Mom loves. If you could Venmo $500 by tomorrow, that would be great. Consider it your contribution to the family meal. We will drink a toast to you. Thanks, Connor. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur. $500. He was uninviting me from my own family home and asking me to pay for the privilege. The audacity was so breathtaking it was almost impressive. It was a level of entitlement that could only come from a man who had never been told no in his life. And my parents were on the email chain. They saw this. They allowed this. I waited for a follow-up text from my mother. Surely she would step in. Surely she would say, "Connor, you cannot ask her for money after telling her not to come." 10 minutes passed. My phone remained silent. I opened the banking app on my phone. I looked at the history of transfers to my mother. Thousands of dollars. I looked at the recurring payments set up for the house in Detroit. The electric bill, the water bill, the property tax fund. They thought the house ran on magic. They thought the heat stayed on because of good vibes. I closed the banking app. On my desk under a stack of quarterly reports was a thick envelope. It had arrived 2 days ago via courier. It was from the Global HR Department. Transfer request approval, Seattle headquarters. Position Director of West Coast Operations. Salary increase 20%. Relocation package full. My boss had been begging me to take this role. He needed someone to clean up the mess in the Seattle division. I had resisted. I told him my parents were getting older. I told him I wanted to be close to my family in Chicago and Detroit. I told him I could not move 3,000 miles away because my family needed me. I looked at the email from Connor again. We want a peaceful energy. Consider it your contribution. My family did not need me. They needed my resources. And they preferred to extract those resources without the inconvenience of my presence. I reached for my Mont Blanc pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. Solid. Real. I pulled the transfer papers out from the stack. I flipped to the signature page. I did not hesitate. I did not tremble. I signed my name, Tasha Williams, with a flourish that tore through the paper. I scanned the document and hit send to HR. Then I opened the airline app. I pulled up my reservation for Chicago to Detroit. First class. Non-refundable but changeable. I hit cancel booking. Credits returned to wallet. Finally, I opened the group chat. The 3 dots were dancing. Brianna was probably typing a follow-up message asking if I had seen the request for the money. I typed one word. Understood. I hit send. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city of Chicago one last time. The wind was whipping off the lake, freezing everything it touched. I felt exactly like that wind. They wanted me gone. They wanted my money without my face. They wanted the house without the landlord. Well, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone again. I dialed a number I had not called in years. It was the number for the family attorney who managed the living trust that technically owned the house my parents lived in. He answered on the second ring. "Hello, Tasha. Everything all right?" "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said. My voice was smooth, professional, and terrifyingly calm. "I need to make some changes to the access permissions for the property on Oak Street, and I need you to draft a notice." "A notice?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "A notice to vacate." "But not yet. Let them eat their turkey first." I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment in the silence. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anger. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted off my shoulders and dropped onto someone else's. I packed my laptop. I put on my coat. I was going to Seattle. I was going to start a new life. But before I left, I had one more thing to do. I opened my laptop one last time and logged into the utility provider for the Detroit area. I navigated to the scheduled payments section. Auto pay on. Status active. Payment method. Tasha Platinum Visa. I clicked Edit. I clicked Cancel Autopay. Confirm cancellation. I clicked Yes. The screen refreshed. Status inactive. Next bill due in 15 days. I did the same for the water. I did the same for the internet. I did the same for the cable TV package with all the sports channels Connor loved so much. I imagined them sitting there on Thanksgiving, the turkey roasting in the electric oven, the game on the big screen TV, the lights glowing warm and bright. And I smiled. "Enjoy the organic turkey, Connor," I whispered to the empty room. "It is going to be the most expensive meal you never paid for." I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. My phone rang again barely 10 minutes after I had sent that final text message. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Mom. For a split second, the little girl inside me, the one with braided hair and a desperate need for approval, sparked with hope. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she had realized how cruel it was to ask for money in the same breath as uninviting me. Maybe she was going to tell me that she had scolded Connor, and that of course I should come home, because Thanksgiving without me would not be Thanksgiving at all. I slid my finger across the screen and answered. "Hello, Mom?" There was no greeting. There was no warmth. There was only that sharp, high-pitched tone she reserved for when I had failed to meet an expectation I never agreed to. "Tasha, really. One word. That is all you have to say to your sister after she poured her heart out to you." I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. The silence in my apartment was heavy, contrasting with the noise on the other end of the line. I could hear the television in the background. I could hear Connor laughing at something. He sounded comfortable. He sounded at home. "I did not pour my heart out, Mom. I said understood." "What else did you want me to say? I wanted you to be gracious," she snapped. "Brianna is crying. She feels like you are judging her. She is trying to create a perfect holiday for little Jack, and you are making it about yourself." Again. I felt a cold laugh bubbling up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Making it about myself. That was their favorite weapon. Any time I expressed a need, a boundary, or a feeling, I was being selfish. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. "Connor emailed me a bill. He uninvited me from dinner and then asked me to pay for the turkey. Do you think that is normal behavior?" "Oh, stop it, Tasha," she sighed. The sound of long-suffering martyrdom. "You know how hard Connor is trying. He is starting a new venture. Things are tight for them. You are a big executive now. You have that fancy apartment and that car. Why do you have to count pennies with your family? It is $500. That is probably what you spend on shoes. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person." The mantra of my life. Being the bigger person meant shrinking myself so they could feel large. It meant swallowing insults so they could swallow vintage wine. I looked around my apartment. It was fancy, yes. But I remembered how I got it. I remembered the 80-hour weeks. I remembered eating instant noodles in my 20s while Brianna was backpacking through Europe on my parents' dime. "Mom," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Do you remember 10 years ago? What? Why are you bringing up the past? We are talking about the turkey. I am talking about the house you are standing in," I said. "Do you remember when Dad had his stroke?" The line went quiet for a beat. Of course I remember. It was the worst day of my life. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me, visceral and sharp. I was 25. I had just gotten my first promotion. I had saved every cent for a down payment on a small condo. Then the call came. Dad collapsed. The ambulance. The hospital waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. But the real horror came 3 days later. While Dad was in rehab learning how to speak again, Mom handed me a stack of envelopes she had been hiding in the pantry drawer. Red letters, final notice, foreclosure imminent. They had refinanced the house to pay for Brianna's private college tuition, and then they had stopped paying the mortgage. They were 3 months behind. The bank was coming for the keys. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table looking at my terrified mother. She was not the imperious matriarch then. She was a frightened woman who had mismanaged everything. "Fix it, Tasha," she had begged me, clutching my hand. "Please do not let your father lose his home. It would kill him." And I did. I fixed it. I walked into the bank the next day. I liquidated my 401k. I emptied my savings account. I sacrificed my own dream of a condo. I paid the arrears. But I did not stop there. I knew they would do it again. So I made a decision that was the smartest thing I ever did, even if it felt cold at the time. I bought the note. I formed a limited liability company, a trust, and I bought the house from them to save them from bankruptcy. I paid off the mortgage. I let them stay there. I told them to just pay the utilities and I would handle the rest. I told them the trust was just a legal shield, which it was. But I never emphasized that I was the sole trustee. I let them pretend it was still their house because I wanted them to have their dignity. I blinked, bringing myself back to the present. "Mom," I repeated, "when I bought that house to save you from being homeless, did I count pennies?" Then, "Oh, here we go," she groaned. "I knew you would throw that in my face eventually. That was 10 years ago, Tasha. We are your parents. You did what a daughter is supposed to do. Do not act like you are a saint because you helped your family." Helped. She called saving their lives helping. And now she continued, her voice taking on that wheedling, demanding tone. "You are punishing your sister because she wants one holiday without your stress. Connor just wants to get the organic turkey. It is $200 for the bird, and the rest for the wine. Just send the money, Tasha. Show us that you still care about this family, even if you are too busy to visit." I realized then with a clarity that cut like a diamond that she did not miss me. She did not care that I would be alone on Thanksgiving. She did not care that her son-in-law had insulted me. She missed the wallet. She missed the safety net. She missed the person who cleaned up the messes. I looked at the packing tape in my hand. I looked at the boxes labeled Seattle. "Okay, Mom," I said softly. "Okay. You will send it?" "Yes. I will send it right now." "Good," she said, the relief audible. "And Tasha, don't be petty. Send a nice message to Connor, too. He is really sensitive about his authority as the man of the house. The man of the house. The man who lived in a house paid for by a woman he despised." I hung up the phone. My hands were not shaking. They were steady. I opened my banking app. I navigated to the transfer screen. Recipient Lucille and Harold joint account. Amount $500. I looked at the memo line. Usually I wrote things like "love you" or "for groceries." Today I typed 2 words. Final payment. I hit transfer. The screen flashed green. Success. But I was not done. That was just the appetizer. Now it was time for the main course. I sat down at my laptop and opened a spreadsheet I had not touched in a long time. It was the master list of household accounts for the property on Oak Street. When I took over the house, I had put all the utilities in my name to ensure they were never late. I had set them to autopay from my personal account. Electricity, gas, water, high-speed internet cable, the security system, the trash collection. For 10 years, money had flowed silently out of my account every month to keep that house warm, lit, and comfortable. They had never seen a bill. They probably did not even know how much electricity cost in the winter. I logged into the electric company portal first. The dashboard showed the usage. It was high. Connor liked to keep the house at 75 degrees and leave all the lights on. I clicked on billing preferences. I selected cancel autopay. A warning box popped up. "Are you sure you may be subject to late fees or service interruption?" I clicked yes. Then I went to the remove payment method screen. I deleted my Visa card. I did the same for the gas company. I did the same for the water department. Then I reached the cable and internet provider. This one gave me a special pause. Connor spent his days gaming and streaming in 4K resolution. The package I paid for was the premium tier costing nearly $300 a month. I did not just cancel the autopay for this one. I modified the plan. I downgraded the service to the basic tier. No sports channels, no movie channels, and the slowest internet speed available, barely enough to check email. The changes would take effect at the start of the next billing cycle, which was tomorrow. Finally, I logged into the county treasurer's website. The property taxes. This was the big one. The bill that came twice a year. If you did not pay this, the county would eventually take the house. I changed the mailing address for the bill. Instead of coming to my secure mailbox in Chicago, I changed it to the property address on Oak Street. Address to occupant. Let them see the bill. Let them see what it actually costs to be a homeowner. I closed the laptop. The room felt darker, but inside me a fire was starting to burn. I picked up my phone one last time. I saw the notification from the bank. The $500 had been deposited. Mom texted, "Got it. Thanks." Connor says thanks too. "We will toast to you." I didn't reply. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. They wanted a peaceful Thanksgiving. They wanted a holiday without my interference. They wanted to play house without the landlord watching. I was giving them exactly what they wanted. Absolute independence. I wondered how long the organic turkey would stay warm when the electric company realized the bill had not been paid. I wondered how Connor would stream his football games with dial-up internet speeds. I wondered if they would realize when the lights flickered and died that I was not the darkness clouding their lives. I was the only thing standing between them and the cold. And now the winter was coming. I turned away from the window and grabbed the last roll of packing tape. The sound of it ripping off the roll was loud, sharp, and satisfying. It sounded like a severance package. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. From this moment on, I was simply the landlord. And tenants who did not pay their rent were about to learn a very hard lesson about eviction. I finished the last box. I printed my boarding pass for Seattle. Goodbye, Chicago. Goodbye, Oak Street. The real show was about to begin, and I would be watching it from 3,000 miles away in high definition through the security cameras I had forgotten to disconnect. Actually, I smiled as I realized something. I had not forgotten. I left the security system active, paid in full, because I wanted to see their faces when the power went out. The rain in Seattle hits the glass differently than it does in Chicago. In the Midwest, the rain attacks the windows, driven by wind that feels like a physical assault. Here in my new apartment on the 35th floor overlooking Elliott Bay, the rain was a constant gray curtain that blurred the lights of the ferries crossing the dark water. I sat at my kitchen island, a sleek slab of quartz that felt cold under my forearms. My Thanksgiving dinner was a carton of pad thai from the place down the street and a glass of water. I had not unpacked my wine glasses yet. I had not unpacked much of anything. The boxes were stacked in the corners like silent sentinels watching me eat my noodles in a silence so deep I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I told myself this was peace. I told myself this was what freedom looked like. No arguments about politics. No passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my career or my lack of a husband. Just me, the view, and the spicy tang of tamarind sauce. But there is a difference between solitude and loneliness, and as I scrolled through my phone looking at photos of friends gathered around golden turkeys and laughing over pie, the hollowness in my chest expanded. Then my phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a notification from Facebook. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Brianna tagged you in a post. Brianna added 15 photos. Connor commented on a post you are tagged in. My stomach turned over. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the blue icon. Part of me wanted to put the phone down to walk away and let them have their performance. But the other part of me, the part that had kept receipts for 10 years, needed to know. I needed to see the production they had staged using my money. I tapped the notification. The first image that loaded was a group selfie. My parents, Brianna Connor, and baby Jack. They were crowded around the dining room table, my dining room table, the mahogany one I had custom ordered 3 years ago. They were all smiling that wide, glossy smile that suggests perfect happiness to anyone who does not know the truth. The turkey was in the center, golden and glistening, the organic bird I had paid for. But as I swiped to the next photo, my breath hitched in my throat. It was a solo shot of Brianna. She was posing on the staircase holding a glass of champagne, looking back over her shoulder with a coy smile. She looked beautiful. She also looked familiar. I zoomed in on the photo. She was wearing a long emerald green silk slip dress with a cowl neck. The fabric caught the light shimmering like liquid money. I knew that fabric, I knew that cut. I had bought that dress in Milan 2 years ago on a business trip. It was vintage Versace. I had worn it once to a gala, and then had it dry cleaned and stored in a garment bag in the closet of the master guest suite, the closet that I kept locked. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. That closet did not just have a simple doorknob lock, it had a deadbolt. I kept my winter coats, my formal wear, and my personal archives in there specifically so that when family stayed over, they would not go rummaging through my things. Brianna was wearing my dress, which meant Brianna had broken into my closet. I swiped again, my finger trembling slightly. The next photo was of Connor. He was standing at the head of the table looking like the lord of the manor. He was in the middle of a toast, one hand raised high. In his other hand, he was clutching a wine bottle by the neck, not the base like a barbarian. I squinted at the label. It was dark dusty with elegant cursive writing. Chateau Margaux, 1998. A sound escaped my lips, a sharp intake of air that was half gasp, half growl. That bottle was worth more than Connor's car. I had bought it at an auction 5 years ago. I was saving it. I did not even know what I was saving it for. Maybe my wedding, maybe the day I finally felt like I had made it, maybe just a Tuesday when I needed to feel something exquisite. It was stored in the wine cellar in the basement. The wine cellar that was secured with a digital keypad. They had not just borrowed some spices from the pantry. They had staged a systematic invasion of my privacy. They had picked locks. They had guessed codes. They had rummaged through my life like looters in a masterless house. And then I saw the caption. Brianna had written, "So grateful for this cozy Thanksgiving with the people who matter most. It is so nice to finally have the house to ourselves without any negative energy. The real owners of this home have spoken cheers to new beginnings and family legacy. Hashtag blessed, hashtag new homeowner, hashtag family first. The real owners." The phrase bounced around my skull like a rubber bullet. The real owners. My parents were tenants at will. Brianna and Connor were guests who had overstayed their welcome by a decade. I was the one whose name was on the deed, the insurance, the tax bill, and the mortgage payoff letter. But in one Facebook post, they had erased me. They had rewritten history to suit their narrative. To their friends, to the church members, to the neighbors, I was just the bitter sister who moved away, leaving the generous parents and the successful young couple to inherit the family estate. They were drinking my wine, wearing my clothes, and dancing on my grave while I was still alive. I put the fork down. I was not hungry anymore. The pad thai tasted like ash. I looked at the comments below the post. Aunt Sheila had written, "Beautiful family, so glad you young ones are taking charge." One of Connor's friends wrote, looking like a boss man, "That crib is sweet." And my own mother had commented, "Finally a peaceful holiday. Love you all so much." Peaceful. They called it peaceful because the person who held them accountable was gone. They called it peaceful because the wallet was open and the conscience was absent. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. This was not just about a dress or a bottle of wine. This was a message. They were telling me that my boundaries did not exist. They were telling me that my property was their birthright. They were telling me that I was nothing more than a resource to be harvested, and now that I was out of the way, They intended to strip the carcass clean. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They thought that because I was 3,000 miles away, I was blind. They thought that because I had moved to Seattle, I had relinquished control. They forgot what I did for a living. I am a director of operations. My job is to see everything. My job is to track assets, monitor inventory, and prevent loss. I do not leave things to chance, and I certainly do not leave a $3 million asset unguarded. I walked back to the kitchen island and opened my laptop. 6 months ago, after I came home to find Connor snooping through my bank statements on my desk, I had installed a new security system. I did not tell anyone. I did not put up a sign in the yard. I bought high-end commercial-grade cameras that were disguised as smoke detectors and motion sensors. They were in the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, and the basement. They recorded in 4K resolution, and they had high-fidelity audio pickup. I had never checked them before today. I had felt guilty about installing them, like I was being paranoid, like I was the one betraying their trust. Now, as I typed in my secure password, that guilt evaporated like mist. The software loaded. A grid of 6 black screens appeared. Connecting, the screen said. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. One by one, the screens flickered to life. Camera 1, the living room. The scene was chaotic. The pristine white carpet I had installed last year was littered with red Solo cups and paper plates. Connor was sitting on the sofa, my beige linen sofa, with his feet up on the coffee table. He was wearing his shoes, muddy Timberland boots, on a glass table imported from Italy. Camera 2, the dining room. The dinner was over. The carcass of the turkey sat on the table, picked clean. But what caught my eye was the wall. The wall where I had hung a painting I bought in New Orleans, a beautiful piece of black art depicting a jazz funeral. The painting was gone. In its place was a framed poster of a sports car. A cheap, crinkled poster taped directly onto the wallpaper with blue painter's tape. Camera 3, the hallway. I saw my mother walking unsteadily toward the kitchen. She was holding my crystal vase, the one Grandma had left me. She was swinging it by the neck like a toy. But it was camera 4 that made my blood run cold. Camera 4 was located in the basement hallway, pointing directly at the door to the wine cellar and the door to my old bedroom, the room I had kept as my office and sanctuary when I stayed over. The door to the wine cellar was open. I could see shattered glass on the floor. It looked like they had tried to pry the lock, and when that failed, they had simply smashed the glass panel of the door to reach in and unlock it from the inside. And the door to my office. It was off its hinges, literally off its hinges, leaning against the wall. I clicked on the feed to maximize it. I turned up the volume. I could hear music thumping from upstairs, but down here I could hear voices. Brianna walked into the frame. She was still wearing my green dress, but now she had spilled something down the front of it. A dark stain, probably red wine. She was dragging a heavy black trash bag. She stopped in front of my office door and shouted up the stairs. Connor, come help me with this. If we are going to turn this into your man cave, we have to get all of her junk out tonight. The garbage truck comes tomorrow morning. Connor stumbled down the stairs, laughing. Man, look at all this trash, he said, kicking a box that was sitting in the hallway. I recognized the box. It was marked Tasha. Yearbooks and awards. It contained my high school diploma, my college degree, my MBA certificate, and every award I had won in my career. Just toss it in the bin, Connor said. She is never coming back for it. He picked up the box. I watched frozen in horror as he upended it. My diploma slid out and hit the concrete floor. The glass frame shattered. Oops, Connor laughed. Looks like she is a dropout now. Brianna giggled. A cruel, sharp sound. Who cares? She has a new life in Seattle. We are doing her a favor. We are decluttering. She reached into my office and pulled out another item. My heart stopped. It was a quilt. Not just any quilt. It was the quilt my grandmother had made for me before she passed away. It was stitched from scraps of my old baby clothes, my school uniforms, and my grandfather's work shirts. It was the most precious thing I owned. I kept it folded on the back of the reading chair in my office. Brianna looked at it with disdain. God, this thing smells like old people, she said. It is so tacky. It does not go with the vibe we want for the media room. She stuffed the quilt into the black trash bag. No, I whispered at the screen. No. Connor grabbed the bag from her. I will put it on the curb. Hopefully it rains tonight and soaks it so nobody tries to dig it out. They laughed. They high-fived. Then Connor grabbed my office chair, my Herman Miller Aeron chair, that I had spent a bonus on, and sat in it spinning around. This is going to be perfect for my gaming setup, he said. Once we knock this wall down, the acoustics will be amazing. Knock the wall down. I switched to the audio feed, turning it up to maximum. Yeah, Connor said. I talked to a guy. He can come on Monday. We take out this wall between her office and the guest room, and boom. Massive home theater. Your parents won't care. They do whatever we tell them. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. They were not just squatting. They were remodeling. They were destroying. They were taking the physical evidence of my existence, my achievements, my memories, my heritage, and throwing it into the trash to make room for a gaming console. I watched Connor lean back in my chair, looking around the room he was planning to gut. He looked so confident, so untouchable. He thought he had won the lottery. He thought he had defeated the dragon and claimed the castle. He had no idea the dragon was watching him in 4K resolution. I hit the record button. Save clip. I watched the progress bar. Download complete. Then I opened a new tab on my browser. I searched for the non-emergency line for the Detroit Police Department. Then I searched for something else. A number I had saved in my contacts under emergency only. It was a private security firm I had used for corporate events. They had a branch in Detroit. They specialized in asset protection. I looked at the time. It was 10 p.m. in Chicago. The party was just getting started, but the hangover was going to be legendary. I picked up my phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call Brianna. I dialed the number for the security firm. This is the after-hours dispatch, a gruff voice answered. This is Tasha Williams, I said, my voice cold as ice. I am the owner of the property at 450 Oak Street. I have a situation involving active vandalism and theft by unauthorized occupants. I need a patrol unit to secure the perimeter. And I need you to meet me there. Meet you there, ma'am? You are in Chicago. I am at the airport. I lied. I will be there in 4 hours. Do not let them leave. And do not let them take anything out of the house, especially the trash bags on the curb. I hung up. I looked at my half-eaten pad thai. I stood up, walked to the trash can, and threw it away. I went to the bedroom and grabbed my go bag. I always kept one packed. I was going back. Not for Thanksgiving. Not for a family reunion. I was going back for war. And as I walked out of my apartment, leaving the lights on and the rain beating against the windows, I checked my phone one last time. Brianna's post had 50 likes. I commented on it. Nice dress, Brianna. Enjoy it. It will be the most expensive outfit you ever wear to court. Then I turned off my phone, got into the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. The descent began. The silence of a high-rise apartment at 2 in the morning is a heavy thing. In Seattle, the city lights below were blurred by the relentless mist, creating a glow that felt artificial and cold. I had been in the city for 7 days. 7 days of waking up in a bed that felt too big, drinking coffee from a mug that was not mine, and going to an office where everyone treated me with a terrified respect. I should have been sleeping. I had a budget review at 8 in the morning, but my body knew something my brain refused to acknowledge. I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, when my phone began to buzz on the nightstand. It was not a text, it was a call. At 2 in the morning, a phone call is never good news. It is an emergency. It is an accident. It is death. I reached for the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The screen was bright in the dark room. Dad. My father Harold never called me past 9 at night. He was a man of routine. He watched the evening news, drank a cup of decaf tea, and went to bed. For him to be calling now meant the world had tilted off its axis. I swiped answer and pressed the phone to my ear. "Dad," I asked, sitting up, the sheets pooling around my waist. "Is everything okay? Is it Mom?" For a long moment there was only the sound of heavy breathing on the other end. It sounded wet and ragged, like he was trying to suppress a sob. "Tasha," his voice was a whisper so faint I had to press the phone harder against my ear. "Tasha, you have to come home. Please, baby girl, you have to come home." The fear in his voice sent a shock of ice water down my spine. My father was the strong, silent type. He was the man who taught me how to change a tire in a snowstorm without complaining. He did not beg. He did not whisper. "What is it, Dad? Are you hurt? Did you fall?" "No," he said, and I could hear the tremble in his words. "It is not me. It is the house. It is them. They are destroying it, Tasha. They are breaking the walls." I froze. I thought about the camera feeds I had watched a week ago, the party, the mess. But I had assumed they would leave after the weekend. I assumed they would go back to their cramped apartment on the other side of town once the turkey was eaten and the wine was drunk. "Who is breaking the walls, Dad?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Connor," he whispered. "And Brianna. They are still here, Tasha. They never left. They brought more boxes yesterday. They brought a truck." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark water of the Puget Sound. "Put them on the phone, Dad," I said, my voice hardening. "I cannot," he said. "I am in the guest bathroom." I locked the door. "Tasha, listen to me. Connor has a sledgehammer. He hired a man from a website. They are in your room. They are in the study." My hand clenched around the phone. My room. The room where I had studied for my SATs. The room where I had built my first business plan. The room that I had converted into a sanctuary with custom built-in bookshelves and soundproofing so I could work in peace when I visited. "Why does he have a sledgehammer, Dad?" "He says he needs to open up the floor plan," my father said, and now he was crying softly. "He says your room has the best feng shui, but it is too small for his gaming setup. He wants to knock down the wall between your room and the hallway to make a man cave. He says he needs a space to think so he can launch his business." A man cave. He was destroying the load-bearing wall of a historic Victorian home that I had paid $400,000 to restore so he could have a place to play video games. "Where is Mom?" I asked. "Why is she letting him do this?" The silence on the other end was worse than the crying. "Your mother is making them sandwiches," Dad whispered. I tried to stop them, Tasha. I stood in front of the door. I told Connor this was your house. I told him he had no right. And your mother pulled me away. She told me to stop being so selfish. She said I was being senile. She said I was jealous of Connor because he is a young man with vision, and I am just an old man stuck in the past. She said we need to support the young couple. She said since you are gone, someone needs to use the space. Senile. The word hung in the air between us. My mother called my father, the man who had worked 40 years at the Ford plant, to put food on our table, senile because he tried to protect my property. She was so desperate to please her golden child and her useless son-in-law that she was willing to emasculate her own husband. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm for his sake. "Did you tell them about the deed? Did you tell them the house belongs to the trust?" "I did," he said. "I told Connor that you pay the bills. I told him this is Tasha House." "And what did he say?" "He laughed. Tasha." He stood there with that hammer in his hand and he laughed at me. He said possession is 9/10 of the law. He said he looked it up on the internet. He told your mother that since you moved to Seattle and changed your mailing address, you have technically abandoned the property. He said there is a law that says, if a family member occupies a space for more than 30 days with the consent of the residents, it becomes their primary residence. He said you cannot kick them out without a court order, and that takes months. I felt a vain throb in my temple. Connor Williams, a man who had dropped out of community college twice, was quoting property law to my father. And the worst part was he was twisting the truth just enough to sound convincing to two elderly people who did not know better. He was using the fear of legal complexity to bully them. He was right about one thing: eviction takes time. But he was wrong about everything else. He was wrong about abandonment. He was wrong about consent. And he was very wrong about me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the phone line. It sounded like wood splintering and drywall crumbling. "Oh God," my father gasped. "They are doing it! They are hitting the wall!" I could hear the muffled sound of cheering in the background. I could hear Brianna's voice shrill and excited saying deeper, "Connor, make it wider." "Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his panic, "listen to me very carefully. I am listening. Do not go out there. Do not try to stop them physically. Connor is drunk on power and probably drunk on my liquor. If he has a hammer, I do not want you near him. But Tasha, they are ruining your home." "It is just drywall, Dad," I said, cold logic taking over. "Drywall can be replaced. Studs can be fixed. But I need you to be safe. I need you to go into your bedroom and lock the door. Do you have your blood pressure medication?" "Yes. Take a pill. Drink some water. Put in your earplugs." "Tasha, what are you going to do? Are you calling the police?" "No," I said. "If I call the police now, they will just call it a civil dispute because Mom invited them in. They will see a family renovating a house. Connor will show them his driver license, which I am sure he has already updated to this address online. I need to be there. I need to stand in front of that house with the deed in my hand and the law on my side." Another crash, louder this time. The sound of destruction was visceral. It felt like they were taking that hammer to my own ribs. I checked the time on the bedside clock. It was 2:15 in the morning. "Dad," I said, "I am booking a flight right now. There is a red eye out of SeaTac at 4 in the morning. I will land in Detroit by 10 a.m. I will be at the house by 11. "You are coming?" he asked, hope flooding back into his voice. "I am coming, Dad. And I am not coming to visit. I am coming to clean house. But Tasha—" He hesitated. Connor said something else. He said he changed the locks on the back door too. He said he installed a security bar. He said he wants to make sure no jealous relatives try to break in. I walked to my closet and pulled out my suitcase. I did not bother with folding clothes. I threw a blazer, a pair of jeans, and my heavy boots into the bag. "Let him bar the door," I said. "Let him build a fortress. He forgets who built that house. He forgets that I have the blueprints. He forgets that I know exactly where the weak points are." "Tasha," my father whispered, "I am sorry. I am so sorry I could not stop them. I am a failure as a father." "Stop it," I said sharply but gently. "You are not a failure. You are a victim of elder abuse, and they are going to pay for every tear you are shedding right now. Go to your room, Dad. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Even if Mom knocks. Especially if Mom knocks." "Okay," he said. "Okay. I love you, baby girl. I love you too, Dad. I will see you in 6 hours." I hung up the phone. I stood there for a moment in the silence of my luxury apartment. The sound of that hammer was still ringing in my ears. They were breaking my walls. They were tearing down the sanctuary I had built to escape the very toxicity they were now spreading into the drywall dust. I opened my laptop. I booked the first-class ticket, $1,200. I did not blink. Then I opened my email. I composed a message to my attorney, Mr. Henderson. Subject: Emergency, Unauthorized Renovation and Elder Abuse. "Mr. Henderson, I am invoking the immediate termination clause of the Living Trust Occupancy Agreement. My parents are no longer capable of maintaining the property and have allowed malicious third parties to cause structural damage. I need a cease and desist order, drafted immediately for Connor Williams and Brianna Williams. I also need you to prepare a restraining order application based on financial exploitation and elder abuse. Meet me at the property at 11:30 a.m. today. Bring the sheriff." I hit send. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but they were dry. Connor wanted a man cave. He wanted a space to think. Well, I was bringing him something to think about. I was going to teach him that you never take a hammer to a wall unless you own the roof above it. I grabbed my bag. I grabbed my coat. The flight was in 2 hours. The war had officially begun. The red-eye flight from Seattle to Detroit is a unique kind of purgatory. You sit in a metal tube at 30,000 feet surrounded by darkness, while your body screams for sleep it cannot find. But I did not want to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the security footage of Connor swinging a sledgehammer into my drywall. I saw Brianna stuffing my grandmother's quilt into a garbage bag. The rage in my chest was not a fire anymore. It was a cold, hard stone. It kept me upright as I walked through the terminal at Detroit Metro Airport at 10 in the morning. My eyes felt like they were full of sand, and my designer blazer felt like armor. I did not go to the baggage claim because I did not check a bag. I walked straight to the rental car counter. I did not want my parents to know I was in town yet. I needed wheels that they would not recognize. I rented a black SUV. Something big. Something that looked like government business. My first stop was not the house on Oak Street. It was a brick building in downtown Detroit, the office of Henderson and Associates. Mr. Henderson had been my father's lawyer for 30 years, and he had been mine for the last 10. He was waiting for me in the lobby holding a thick leather binder. He did not smile. He knew why I was there. "Here is everything, Tasha," he said, handing me the binder. It felt heavy in my hands. 5 pounds of paper, 5 pounds of legal dominance. Inside was the original deed, the trust agreement, the power of attorney, and most importantly, the revocation of occupancy rights that we had drafted remotely 3 hours ago. "Be careful," Mr. Henderson said as I turned to leave. "Family disputes are the most dangerous kind. People get desperate when they realize the free ride is over." I nodded. "I am not desperate, Mr. Henderson. I am just evicted, and I am about to return the favor." I drove to the old neighborhood. The streets were gray and wet with slush. The sky was the color of a bruised plum. It was the kind of Michigan winter day that seeped into your bones. As I turned onto Oak Street, my heart began to hammer against my ribs. I told myself to breathe. I told myself I was a director of operations, a woman who managed million-dollar logistics chains. I could handle a brother-in-law with a Napoleonic complex. Then I saw the house. My house. The Victorian porch I had paid $15,000 to restore was cluttered with boxes. But it was the lawn that made me slam on the brakes. Connor's truck, a rusted behemoth that leaked oil like a sieve, was parked on the grass. Not on the driveway, on the grass. The Kentucky bluegrass sod I had laid down 2 summers ago was now churned up into mud tracks. The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. I parked the rental car across the street. I grabbed the leather binder. I checked my phone. I had the security firm on speed dial, but I wanted to do this face-to-face first. I wanted to look him in the eye when I told him to get out. I walked up the driveway. The air smelled of wood smoke and exhaust. I climbed the porch steps. I reached into my purse for my key. I had a master key that opened every door in the house. I slid the key into the lock on the front door. It did not fit. I frowned, shoving it harder. Metal scraped against metal, but it would not turn. I pulled back and looked at the lock. My stomach dropped. The Schlaga Smart Lock, a $300 piece of technology that allowed me to grant access remotely and track entries, was gone. In its place was a shiny, gold-colored deadbolt, the kind you buy in a blister pack at the hardware store for $10. It sat crookedly on the door, surrounded by scratches where someone had used a screwdriver with no skill and too much force. They had changed the locks. They had actually done it. I stood there for a moment, staring at that cheap piece of brass. It was the ultimate symbol of what they had done to my life. They had taken something secure and valuable and replaced it with something cheap and broken. I did not knock. I pressed the doorbell. I held my finger on the button. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. I heard heavy footsteps inside. I heard a muffled curse. Then the door yanked open. Connor stood there. It was 11:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. He was wearing nothing but a pair of gray sweatpants that sagged low on his hips. No shirt. His stomach hung over the waistband. In his right hand he held a can of cheap beer. In his left hand he held a half-eaten slice of pizza. He looked at me. He blinked his eyes bleary and red. "Oh," he said, "it is you." He did not look scared. He did not look ashamed. He looked annoyed, like I was a door-to-door salesman interrupting his favorite show. "Hello, Connor," I said. My voice was so calm it frightened me. "We are not buying anything," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "And Brianna is sleeping. She is exhausted. Hosting Thanksgiving was a lot of work. You wouldn't know about that though, would you, since you bailed on the family?" He started to close the door. I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said. "Look, Tasha." He sighed, leaning against the doorframe, scratching his chest. "This is a private residence. We are trying to enjoy our morning. You can't just show up here unannounced. It is rude. You need to call first. Maybe we can squeeze you in next week. Private residence." The words echoed in my head. I looked past him into the hallway. I saw the mud on the floor. I saw a stack of pizza boxes on the antique console table. "I am going to come in, Connor," I said, "and we are going to have a conversation about the lock you just installed on my door." His face darkened. He stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door behind him but not closing it fully. He loomed over me. He was a big man, soft but heavy. He used his size to intimidate my father. He thought he could use it on me. "Your door." He laughed, a wet hacking sound. "You really need to move on, Tasha. You moved to Seattle. You abandoned this place. Possession is the law. We live here. We have the keys. That makes it ours. Now get off my porch before I call the cops and have you trespass." I looked at the beer can in his hand. I looked at the smug satisfaction on his face. I took a step closer. I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath. "This is not your porch, Connor," I said, raising the leather binder. "This is the property of Tasha Williams Holdings, LLC. I have the deed right here. I have the receipts for every nail in this floor and every shingle on this roof. And that lock you put on, that is destruction of property. You have 5 minutes to pack a bag and get out." Connor stared at the binder. For a second I saw a flash of doubt in his eyes. But then his ego took over. The ego of a man who had been handed everything his whole life and convinced himself he earned it. He sneered. "I don't care about your paperwork," he spat. "I don't care about your LLC. This is family business. And you are not family anymore. You are just a bitter, lonely woman who can't stand to see her sister happy." He grabbed the handle of the door. "Goodbye, Tasha," he said. He tried to slam the door. I moved on instinct. I jammed my foot, clad in a heavy winter boot, into the gap. The door slammed against my boot with a thud. "Open the door, Connor," I commanded. "I am coming in to see my father." He pushed against the door from the inside. I pushed back. I was stronger than I looked, and I was fueled by 10 years of suppressed anger. "You are not coming in," he shouted. "This is my house." He threw his weight against the wood. I braced my shoulder against the panel. "This is not your house. It is a trust." Suddenly he stopped pushing. He pulled the door open. I stumbled forward off balance. Before I could regain my footing, Connor stepped out. He placed both hands on my shoulders. His palms were sweaty and hot. "Get out." He shoved me. He did not just push me. He launched me. I flew backward. My heels caught on the edge of the top step. I flailed, reaching for the railing, but it was too far away. I fell. I hit the concrete steps hard. My hip struck the edge of the second stair. My elbow cracked against the pavement of the walkway. The pain was white-hot and immediate. It shot up my leg and exploded in my shoulder. I landed in the slush at the bottom of the stairs. The cold wetness soaked through my blazer instantly. My leather binder, My precious shield slid across the driveway and landed in a puddle of mud. I gasped. The air knocked out of me. I lay there for a second, staring up at the gray sky, stunned. He had touched me. He had put his hands on me. I rolled over, pushing myself up on my good arm. My left arm was throbbing. I looked up at the porch. Connor was standing there. He looked surprised for a second, like he hadn't meant to push me that hard. But then, as he looked down at me struggling in the mud, a slow, malicious smile spread across his face. He saw an opportunity. He reached into the pocket of his sweatpants and pulled out his phone. He did not call an ambulance. He did not come down to help me. He dialed 3 digits. I watched him, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of it. He put the phone to his ear, his eyes locked on mine. 911, he shouted, his voice suddenly pitching up into a fake panic. Please help. I need police immediately. There is an intruder at 450 Oak Street. She is crazy. She is attacking me. I tried to stand up, but my leg buckled. She is trying to break down the door. He yelled into the phone, backing into the house like a terrified victim. She hit me. Please hurry. I am scared for my wife and baby. He looked at me one last time. He winked. Then he slammed the door. And I heard the deadbolt slide home. I sat there in the freezing mud. My hip was burning. My elbow was bleeding. My clothes were ruined. And I started to laugh. It was a low, dry sound at first, but it grew louder. He called the police. He actually called the police. He thought he was setting me up. He thought he was going to paint me as the crazy, violent sister-in-law. He thought the police would come and drag me away, leaving him victorious in his stolen castle. He did not know who the police chief was. He did not know that Sheriff Miller played poker with my father every Tuesday night for 20 years until Connor made Dad stop going. He did not know that I had already called the security firm, and most importantly, he did not know about the camera on the porch. I looked up. Disguised as a motion sensor light directly above the door was a small black lens. It had recorded everything. It had recorded the conversation. It had recorded him admitting he changed the locks. It had recorded the shove. And it had recorded the fake 911 call. Connor Williams had just handed me a felony assault charge and a false police report charge on a silver platter. I reached for my phone. It was cracked, but it still worked. I did not call 911. They were already coming. I called Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice shaking with pain and adrenaline. Yes, Tasha. Add assault and battery to that restraining order, I said. And tell the sheriff to bring handcuffs. Real ones. I slowly pulled myself up, leaning against the porch railing. I picked up my muddy binder. I wiped the dirt off the cover. I stood there waiting for the sirens. The pain in my body was sharp, but the clarity in my mind was absolute. Connor wanted a war. He just dropped the first bomb on himself. The sound of sirens in a quiet suburb is designed to be terrifying. It is a sound that announces catastrophe to the world. As the blue and red lights cut through the gray Michigan morning, bouncing off the snow and the wet pavement, I stood on the driveway, clutching my muddy binder. My hip was throbbing with a dull, sickening heat, where I had hit the concrete, but I did not rub it. I did not flinch. I watched as 3 squad cars screeched to a halt in front of the house. This was the theater Connor wanted. He wanted the spectacle. He wanted the neighbors to see the angry black woman being dragged away from the nice Victorian home, and the neighbors were certainly watching. I saw Mrs. Gable across the street, peering through her lace curtains. I saw the young couple 2 doors down, standing on their porch with their phones out. The front door of my house flew open. My mother, Lucille, burst onto the porch. She was not wearing a coat, just a thin cardigan over her house dress, acting the part of the distressed matriarch to perfection. She did not look at me. She did not ask if I was hurt. She ran straight to Connor, who was standing by the door, looking shaken and victimized. "Oh my God, are you okay?" I heard her shriek. Her voice was shrill, carrying over the wind. "Did she hurt you?" Connor nodded, rubbing his shoulder where I had supposedly attacked him. She is crazy, Lucille. She tried to break the door down. I think she is on something. Two officers stepped out of the first car. They were young white and already had their hands resting near their belts. They saw the tableau that Connor had set up. The frantic older woman, the shirtless man defending his home, and me, the intruder standing in the driveway with mud on her blazer. "Ma'am, step away from the house," the first officer shouted, pointing at me. "Keep your hands where I can see them." I did not move. I did not raise my hands like a criminal. I simply adjusted my grip on the leather binder. "Officer," I said, my voice projecting clearly, "I am the property owner. I was assaulted by the man on the porch." "Liar," my mother screamed. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is lying. She is my daughter, but she is mentally unstable. She has been harassing us for money. She moved away, and now she is back to terrorize us." "Officer, please." She pushed my son-in-law. She tried to kick the door in. The betrayal hit me harder than the fall. Mentally unstable, harassing them for money. My mother, the woman whose credit card debt I had cleared, whose medical bills I paid, was standing there telling the police that I was the villain. She was choosing the lie. She was choosing the image of the happy family with Connor and Brianna over the reality of her own daughter. The officer walked toward me, his face hard. "Ma'am, I am going to ask you one more time. Step off the property. The homeowners have asked you to leave. If you do not comply, you will be arrested for trespassing and disturbance of the peace." Homeowners, that word again. I felt a car pull up behind me, a black sedan. Then another squad car, this one marked sheriff. I did not step back. I looked the officer in the eye. "I cannot trespass on my own land, officer," I said. "And those people are not homeowners. They are guests who have overstayed their welcome by exactly 10 years. The officer reached for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, turn around." "Wait!" The voice boomed like a cannon shot. Mr. Henderson stepped out of the black sedan. He was a small man in his 60s, but he wore his three-piece suit like a suit of armor. He walked with a cane, but he moved with the speed of a man who billed $400 an hour, and behind him was Sheriff Miller, my father's old poker buddy, the man who used to give me peppermint candies when I was a little girl. He looked older now, his face lined, but his eyes were sharp. "Officer, wait," Sheriff Miller said, holding up a hand. "I know this young woman," Connor yelled from the porch. "I do not care who you know. She attacked me. I want to press charges." Sheriff Miller looked up at the porch. He looked at Connor's shirtless chest. He looked at my mother's tear-streaked face. Then he looked at me. He saw the mud on my clothes. He saw the way I was favoring my left leg. "Tasha," he said softly, "are you okay?" "I will be fine, Sheriff," I said, "but I need to report a crime." "This is ridiculous," the young officer said, looking confused. "Sheriff, the homeowners say—" "Let's clarify who the homeowners are right now," Mr. Henderson interrupted. He walked up to the young officer and opened the binder I was holding. He did not ask for permission. He simply laid the document flat on the hood of the squad car. "This is a certified copy of the deed," Mr. Henderson said. "The property at 450 Oak Street is owned solely by Tasha Williams Holdings, LLC. The sole managing member of that LLC is Miss Tasha Williams, the lady you were about to arrest." The officer looked down at the paper. He blinked. Mr. Henderson flipped the page. "And this," he continued, his voice dripping with legal precision, "is the occupancy agreement signed by Harold and Lucille Williams 10 years ago. It grants them status as tenants at will. It explicitly states in Clause 4, Section B, that they are prohibited from subletting the property or allowing any guest to reside on the premises for more than 72 consecutive hours without written permission from the landlord." He flipped another page. "And this is the revocation of that tenancy effective immediately due to breach of contract and destruction of property." The silence that fell over the driveway was absolute. Even the neighbors stopped whispering. Sheriff Miller took the binder. He put on his reading glasses. He took his time. He looked at the deed. He looked at the signature on the occupancy agreement. Then he looked up at the porch. Connor was not smirking anymore. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. My mother had stopped crying. She was staring at the binder with a look of pure horror. Sheriff Miller walked up the driveway. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs right where I had fallen. "Mr. Williams, is it?" the sheriff asked Connor. "Yes," Connor said, his voice cracking. "But listen, that paperwork is old. We have been living here. Squatter rights?" "Sir, stop talking," the sheriff barked. "In this county, you do not get squatter rights when there is a signed contract prohibiting your presence. According to these documents, you are not a tenant, you are an unauthorized occupant, and since the owner is standing right here telling you to leave your presence here, is now criminal trespassing. But my mother-in-law invited me," Connor shouted, pointing at Lucille. The sheriff turned to my mother. "Lucille, is this true? Did you invite him to stay indefinitely in violation of your contract with your daughter?" My mother looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to tell the sheriff it was all a big misunderstanding. She wanted the Tasha who fixed things to step in, but that Tasha was gone, that Tasha had died the moment Connor shoved her off the porch. I stared back at her, my face stone cold. Lucille stammered, I, it is family property, Sheriff. We are family." The sheriff shook his head. "The law does not care about family feelings, Lucille. It cares about who owns the bricks. And right now this man is trespassing." The sheriff turned back to Connor. "And furthermore," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, "I have known Tasha since she was in pigtails. I see mud on her back. I see her limping. If I check the security camera that I see mounted right above your head, am I going to see you putting your hands on the property owner?" Connor looked up at the camera. He turned pale. He realized the trap he had walked into. She was blocking the door," he mumbled. "That is assault and battery," the sheriff said. "Officer read him his rights." "What?" Connor screamed as the young officer marched up the stairs. "You cannot arrest me. I live here." "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer said, pulling out his handcuffs. The metal clicked. A beautiful sound. Brianna ran out of the house then. She was wearing pajamas, her hair a mess. "Connor, what is happening, Mom? Do something." My mother was sobbing now, for real this time. "Tasha, please stop this. He is your brother-in-law. Think of the baby." I limped up the stairs past the officer who was dragging a struggling Connor down. I stopped in front of my mother and Brianna. I looked at the cheap gold lock on the door. Mr. Henderson handed me a document. I held it out to my mother. "You have a choice, Mom," I said. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "How can you be so cruel? We are your family." I ignored her question. "You have a choice," I repeated. "The lease is void. You broke the rules. You let them destroy my walls. You let him change my locks. You watched him push me and you lied to the police." I took a step closer. "So here's the deal. You want them to stay fine, then you all go." I pointed to the street. "If you choose them, I will put a for sale sign on this lawn tomorrow morning. I will sell this house to a developer who will tear it down and build condos. And you can all go live in Connor's one-bedroom apartment." My mother gasped. "You wouldn't. Your father—" "My father is the only reason you are not in handcuffs right now for aiding and abetting," I said. "So decide, Lucille. Do you want a roof over your head? Or do you want to keep playing happy family with the man who just assaulted your daughter?" Brianna screamed. "Mom, don't listen to her. She is bluffing. She won't kick Dad out." I turned to Brianna. "Try me," I whispered. "I just flew 3,000 miles to reclaim a house I already own. Do you really think I am bluffing?" I turned back to my mother. The sirens were still flashing, painting her face in red and blue light. "Well," I asked, "who is leaving him, or all of you?" My mother looked at Connor being shoved into the back of the squad car. She looked at Brianna wailing. Then she looked at the house. Her warm, comfortable house. She looked down at her feet. He can't stay here, she whispered. What? Brianna shrieked. Mom. He broke the rules, my mother said, her voice trembling. She looked up at me, fear in her eyes. I didn't know about the contract, Tasha. I didn't know. She was lying again. But it didn't matter. She had folded. I turned to the sheriff. Get him out of here, I said, and tell the officers to escort my sister off the premises. She has 10 minutes to pack a bag for herself and the baby. But I live here, Brianna yelled. Not anymore, I said. Guest privileges revoked. I watched as the police led them away. I watched the neighbors staring. I watched my mother shrink into herself, defeated. I took the master key from my purse, the real one for the back door that I knew they hadn't changed yet because the hardware store was out of stock. I walked past my mother. I am going to see Dad, I said. Do not follow me unless you want to explain to him why his son-in-law is in jail. I opened the door and stepped into the warmth of the house. It smelled of stale pizza and betrayal. But as the door closed behind me, shutting out the sirens and the screaming, I knew one thing. Round one was over, and I was the one still standing. The silence inside the house was worse than the sirens outside. As I stepped over the threshold, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me, the air in the hallway felt thick and stagnant. It smelled of stale beer, old pizza grease, and something sharper, something like drywall dust and defeat. Sheriff Miller walked in behind me, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor I had paid to have refinished just last year. Behind him, Officer Jenkins had a firm grip on Connor's arm, although Connor was no longer struggling. The handcuffs had taken the fight out of him, leaving only a sullen, sweaty fear. My mother and Brianna trailed in last, huddled together, like survivors of a natural disaster, though they were the ones who had caused the storm. I stopped in the foyer and looked around. This was the space where I had greeted guests for Christmas parties. It was the space where my father used to sit in his armchair and read the paper. Now it looked like a frat house after a particularly destructive weekend. The antique console table was covered in stacks of glossy flyers. I picked one up. Connor Williams' Elite Real Estate Solutions. Your dream home awaits. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was advertising dream homes while actively turning mine into a nightmare. Boxes of promotional keychains and cheap pens were stacked precariously against the wall, scuffing the paint. He had turned my entryway into a storage unit for a business that existed only in his imagination. I walked into the living room. My stomach turned. The beige linen sofa imported from Italy was stained with dark circles that looked like red wine. There were no coasters, just rings of indifference stamped onto fabric that cost more than Connor's truck. Fast food wrappers were stuffed between the cushions. A half-eaten bag of chips sat on the mantel right next to the urn containing my grandmother's ashes. The disrespect was not just in the big things, it was in the details. It was in the way they had colonized every inch of my sanctuary with their filth. Tasha, my mother whispered from the doorway. Her voice was trembling. We can clean this up. We were going to clean it up tomorrow. Connor has just been so busy with his launch. I did not answer her. I could not look at her. If I looked at her, I would scream, and I was done screaming. I was in documentation mode now. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen was cracked from the fall, but the camera still worked. Click. The wine stains on the sofa. Click. The scratches on the hardwood floor where they had dragged furniture. Click. The unauthorized flyers cluttering the foyer. I moved toward the kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dishes. The carcass of the organic turkey sat on the counter, stripped of meat, baking in the heat of the afternoon sun coming through the window. Flies were buzzing around it. The smell was nauseating. My Le Creuset pots, the ones I treated like children, were encrusted with burnt food. They had lived here for a week like animals, consuming everything and preserving nothing. But the kitchen and living room were just the appetizer. I knew the main course was upstairs. I turned toward the staircase. My hip throbbed with every step, a sharp reminder of Connor's shove. I gripped the banister, pulling myself up. Sheriff Miller followed me. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to go up there?" he asked softly. "You might not want to see it." "I have to see it, Sheriff," I said, my voice flat. "I need to know what the damages are." I reached the top of the landing. The door to my office, my sanctuary, was wide open. Or rather, it was gone. The hinges had been stripped. I stepped into the room. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The beautiful calmness of my workspace was gone. The air was white with gypsum dust. It covered everything like a ghostly snow. And there on the north wall, the wall that separated my office from the guest room, was a gaping, jagged hole. It was not a neat renovation cut. It was violence. They had taken sledgehammers to the plaster and lath, smashing through without any regard for electrical wiring or structural integrity. The studs were exposed, splintered, and raw. Wires dangled dangerously from the ceiling where they had ripped out a sconce. The hole was about 6 feet wide, large enough for a man to walk through, joining the two rooms into one monstrosity of a space. This was Connor's man cave. This jagged wound in my house was his vision. I walked over to the hole. I touched the rough edge of the broken drywall. Dust coated my fingertips. I looked down at the floor. My books. My beautiful collection of first editions, business textbooks, and African American history volumes were not on shelves. They were piled in the corner, covered in debris. Some were torn. A heavy chunk of plaster had fallen directly onto a signed copy of a book by Maya Angelou, cracking the spine. "Where are my clothes?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I looked toward the closet. It was empty. The custom shelving I had installed was bare. I turned and walked through the hole in the wall into the guest room. The balcony doors were open. I walked out onto the small balcony that overlooked the backyard. There, sitting in the rain, were 6 black heavy-duty trash bags. I crouched down, ignoring the pain in my leg. I ripped open the first bag, my Balmain blazer, my silk blouses, my cashmere sweaters. They were stuffed inside, wet and smelling of mildew. They had not just packed them, they had thrown them out. They had treated my professional wardrobe, the armor I wore to command boardrooms, as garbage to be discarded to make room for gaming chairs and mini-fridges. I stood up. I felt a coldness settle over me that was deeper than the November chill. This was hatred. You do not do this to someone you love. You do not destroy their home and throw their possessions into the rain unless you despise them. Unless you resent their success so much that you want to erase it physically. I walked back inside, past the hole, past the ruined books. I took out my phone again. Click. The hole in the wall. Click. The exposed wiring. Click. The ruined books. Click. The trash bags on the balcony. I walked back out to the landing where everyone was waiting. Connor was leaning against the wall, guarded by the officer. He looked pale. He had seen my face. "Sheriff," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hallway, "I want you to note the extent of this damage." I pointed to the hole. "That is a load-bearing wall," I said. "To repair that, I will need a structural engineer. I will need new drywall, new electrical wiring, new paint, and new flooring. The labor alone will be in the thousands." I pointed to the balcony. "My wardrobe in those bags is valued at roughly $15,000. The water damage from being left outside means most of it is a total loss." I turned to Connor. "And the furniture downstairs, the antique table, the hardwood floors." I did the math in my head. It was a calculation I had done 1,000 times for logistics failures, but never for my own life. "Conservative estimate," I said, locking eyes with Connor. "You are looking at $30,000 to $40,000 in damages." Connor's eyes widened. "No way," he stammered. "It is just some drywall. I was going to fix it up nice. It is an improvement." "It is vandalism," I corrected him. "And in the state of Michigan, malicious destruction of property over $1,000 is a felony. Destruction over $20,000. That is a 10-year maximum sentence. The color drained from Connor's face completely. He looked like he was going to be sick. Felony, he whispered. Yes, Connor, I said, taking a step closer to him. You didn't just break a wall, you broke the law. You are not just looking at a trespassing charge anymore. You are looking at grand larceny and malicious destruction of property. You are going to prison. He looked at the sheriff, panic rising in his chest. Sheriff, tell her she is crazy. It is a domestic dispute. I am family. The sheriff shook his head slowly. Tasha is right, son. I am looking at that wall and I am seeing structural damage. That is not a dispute. That is a crime scene. Connor turned to my mother. Lucille, he screamed. Help me. She is trying to ruin me. My mother let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She pushed past the sheriff and grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my blazer, the only dry one I had left. Tasha, stop this, she shrieked. You cannot send him to prison. He is your sister's husband. He is the father of your nephew. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Let go of me, I said quietly. She did not let go. She shook me. What is wrong with you? She cried. Is money all you care about? It is just stuff. It is just a house. How can you be so cold? Are you even human anymore? You would destroy this family over some drywall. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me pay her bills for a decade. I looked at the woman who had stood by while her son-in-law shoved me down the stairs. It is not just drywall, Mom, I said, pulling my arm from her grip. It is my life. It is my hard work. And you let him treat it like trash. I turned to the sheriff. Book him, I said. I want to press full charges. Every single one. You monster, my mother screamed. You are a monster. I turned my back on her. I walked over to the hole in the wall and looked through it at the wreckage of my room. If standing up for myself makes me a monster, I thought, then I will be the scariest monster you have ever seen. Take him away, I heard the sheriff say. As they dragged Connor down the stairs, kicking and screaming, and as my mother collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, I took one last picture of the hole. It was the perfect evidence, but it was also a symbol. They had broken the wall, yes, but they had also broken the last tether holding me to them. And now I was free to bring the whole house down on top of them. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers had finally faded from the living room walls, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. The neighbors had retreated behind their curtains, but I knew they were still watching. They were witnessing the fall of the House of Williams. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale pizza and the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline. My mother, Lucille, sat on the ruined beige sofa, weeping softly into a tissue. Brianna sat next to her, staring at the floor, her face a mask of shock and resentment. My father, Harold, sat in his armchair, the one with the worn velvet upholstery, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen him. I did not sit. I could not sit. My hip was throbbing with a relentless hot pain, and my elbow felt stiff, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold fury that was keeping me upright. I walked to the front door and nodded to the man standing there. His name was Mr. Thorne, a private security contractor I had hired en route. He was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and stone-faced professionalism. He stood with his back to the door, arms crossed, a silent guarantee that Connor would not be returning and that my family would not be leaving until I was done with them. I locked the deadbolt. Then I turned to face them. It is time to have a meeting, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through my mother's sobbing like a knife. Tasha, please, Mom whimpered, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. He is in jail. You sent your brother-in-law to jail. Is that not enough for you? Can we not just stop this now? I walked over to the large, flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. It was one of the few things in the room that Connor hadn't destroyed, probably because he valued high-definition sports more than he valued my walls. I pulled an HDMI cable from my bag. My movements were precise and mechanical. I was no longer the daughter. I was the chief operating officer conducting a post-mortem on a failed project. "No, Mom," I said, plugging the cable into my iPad. "We are not done. We are just getting started. You called me cold. You called me a monster. You said I care too much about money. So let us talk about money. Let us talk about exactly how much money it costs to be a member of this family." I tapped the screen of my iPad. The TV flickered to life. A massive Excel spreadsheet appeared glowing bright and harsh in the dim room. It was a document I had maintained meticulously for 10 years. Every row was a transaction. Every column was a category. It was the ledger of my life and their dependency. I picked up a laser pointer I kept in my bag for board meetings. A red dot appeared on the screen, dancing over the numbers. "Let us look at column A," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "This is the mortgage. When I bought this house from you 10 years ago to save you from foreclosure, the principal balance was $200,000. But because of your bad credit and the predatory refinancing you had done, the interest was eating you alive. I paid it off." I highlighted the total at the bottom of the column. $480,000, I read aloud. "That is the total amount including taxes, insurance, and maintenance that I have poured into this structure over the last decade. That is $480,000 that I did not put into my retirement, that I did not spend on vacations, that I did not use to buy a home for myself until this year. I spent it on a roof over your heads." I looked at Brianna. She was chewing her lip, refusing to meet my eyes. "And you, Brianna?" I said, moving the red dot to a new tab labeled Education. "You told everyone I was jealous of you because you were the pretty one, the creative one. Let us look at the cost of your creativity." I scrolled down. "Tuition, room and board. Study abroad program in Italy. 4 years of a degree you never used. $85,000, I said. "Paid in full. By me. Because Mom and Dad could not qualify for a loan, and you did not want to work a part-time work-study job." Brianna shifted uncomfortably. "You said that was a gift," she muttered. "You said you wanted me to have the opportunities you did not have." "I did," I said. "I gave it freely. But gifts come with the expectation of gratitude, not entitlement. And certainly not the expectation that you can break into my house and throw my clothes in the trash." I turned back to the screen. "But those are the big numbers," I continued. "The noble numbers. The ones you can justify as family helping family. Now let us look at the ugly numbers. The ones nobody talks about." I clicked on a tab marked Lucille Discretionary. My mother stopped crying. She stiffened her posture, straightening her spine against the cushions. "Tasha, do not do this," she whispered. "Please." I ignored her. "5 years ago, Mom, you came to me crying. You said Dad needed a surgery that insurance would not cover. You said you needed $50,000. I transferred it immediately. I did not ask for a receipt. I trusted you." I zoomed in on a cluster of transactions from 2018. "But then I saw the credit card statements you left on the counter last Christmas. I took a picture of them. And I did some digging." The red dot hovered over a list of merchants. Nordstrom, Macy's, the Sky City Casino. "There was no surgery, was there, Mom?" I asked, turning to look at her. The room was deathly silent. My father slowly turned his head to look at his wife. His face was a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Lucille," he asked, his voice raspy. "What is she talking about? My hernia surgery was covered by Medicare." My mother looked trapped. Her eyes darted from me to Dad to the door. "It was for debts," she stammered. "I had debts, Harold. Grocery bills, things for the house. I did not want to worry you." I laughed. A short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "Debts?" I asked. "Mom, I paid the bills. I paid the groceries. That $50,000 went to slot machines and designer handbags that you hid in the attic. You stole from me using Dad's health as a shield." My father looked like he had been slapped. He slumped back in his chair, his hand covering his mouth. "But that is not even the worst part," I said. "That is just theft. What I am about to show you is fraud. I swiped to the final tab on the spreadsheet. This one was different. It contained a scanned PDF document. It was a loan agreement. 2 months ago, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I got an alert from a credit monitoring service. It was for an inquiry on the property title. I thought it was a mistake. But then I dug deeper. I pointed to the document on the screen. This is a high-interest short-term loan. A hard money loan. $100,000. The kind of loan drug dealers and desperate gamblers take out. I looked at Brianna. She had gone pale. Connor took out this loan, I said. He needed capital for his real estate business. But no bank would touch him. So he went to a predatory lender. And do you know what he used as collateral? I pointed to the address on the top of the loan document. 450 Oak Street, my house. Brianna stood up. That is impossible, she said, her voice shaking. Connor told me he got an investor. He said a venture capitalist backed him. He lied, I said. But here is the catch. Connor does not own this house. He cannot use it as collateral unless… I scrolled down to the signature page. Unless he has the owner's permission, or someone acting as the owner. There at the bottom of the page was a signature. It was shaky. It looked like an attempt to copy my handwriting, but it was off. Beside it was another signature. A witness. Lucille Williams. I turned to my mother. The laser pointer trembled in my hand. You signed this, Mom, I said. You signed as a witness to a power of attorney document that claimed I had authorized Connor to leverage the equity in this home. My mother burst into fresh tears. He told me it was just for paperwork, she wailed. He said he needed a family member to verify his address. He said the business was going to make millions, and he would pay it off in 3 months. He promised me Tasha. He said it was a formality. A formality, I shouted, losing my composure for the first time. It is a lien, a $100,000 lien on a house I own. If he defaults, and he will default, the lender can try to foreclose on this property. You helped him commit mortgage fraud. You helped him put a gun to the head of the only asset that keeps you and Dad off the street. I walked over to the coffee table and slammed my hand down on a stack of Connor's fake business flyers. He used you, Mom. He knew you were desperate for him to be the son you always wanted. He knew you wanted him to be successful so you could brag to your friends. So he fed you a lie and you swallowed it whole. And in the process, you sold me out. Again. I looked at Brianna. Your husband is not just a squatter, Brianna. He is a felon. He forged my signature. And Mom verified it. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. Brianna sank back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. He said he was going to buy us a mansion, she sobbed. He said this was just a stepping stone. I unplugged the iPad. The TV screen went black, plunging the room back into shadows. The dream is over, I said. The numbers do not lie. You are all bankrupt, morally and financially. I stood there breathing hard. My hip was screaming in pain, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The secret was out. The rot had been exposed. Then I heard a sound. It was the rustling of paper. My father stood up. He walked over to the TV stand where I had laid down the printed copies of the documents. His hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled like dry leaves in a storm. He picked up the loan document. He put on his reading glasses, which were hanging on a chain around his neck. He stared at the signature at the bottom. The signature of his wife of 40 years. He looked at the date. 2 months ago. He looked at the amount. $100,000. He looked at the interest rate, 25%. He lowered the paper. He turned to look at my mother. Harold, she whispered, reaching a hand out to him. Harold, please try to understand. Connor said… Silence, my father roared. The sound was so loud and so unexpected that we all jumped. Even the security guard at the door flinched. My father never raised his voice. He was the peacemaker, the quiet one. But now he was trembling with a rage that had been building for years. He looked at the woman he had loved since high school. He looked at the wreckage of his living room. He looked at me, his daughter standing there bruised and limping. You knew, he said, his voice shaking with betrayal. You knew he was stealing the equity from Tasha. I did not know it was stealing, Mom cried. I thought it was an investment. It is Tasha's house, Dad shouted, slamming the paper down on the table. It is not yours to invest. She saved us. She worked herself to the bone to keep a roof over our heads when I got sick. And you signed it away to that lazy, arrogant thief. He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. I defended you, Lucille, he said, his voice breaking. When Tasha left, I defended you. I told myself you were just lonely. I told myself you just loved the girls differently. But this, he picked up the document again and waved it in her face. This is evil. You sold our daughter's safety for a lottery ticket. He looked at Brianna. And you. You watched him break the walls. You watched him throw your sister's life in the trash. And you cheered him on. Dad, please, Brianna sobbed. My father turned to me. He walked over to where I was standing. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was rough and warm. Tasha, he said softly, I am so sorry. I should have stopped them. I should have been a man. You are a man, Dad, I whispered, fighting back tears. You are the only man here. He nodded slowly. Then he turned back to my mother. He took a deep breath. He looked at the wedding ring on his finger. Then he looked at her with eyes that were suddenly very clear and very cold. Lucille, he said, his voice steady, now terrifyingly calm. You have been complaining for years that I am old and useless. You have been complaining that I do not provide enough. Harold, no. Well, you are right, he said. I cannot provide for a criminal, and I will not live with a traitor. He held up the loan document one last time. Lucille, he said, asking the question that hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Did you really sell the soul of this family and the roof over our heads just so that boy could play pretend businessman? Did you really sell your own daughter out for a man who is currently sitting in a jail cell? Because if you did, then I have no wife, and this house has no home. The silence in the room was shattered by the sound of Brianna weeping. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times before. Whenever she was cornered, whenever her selfishness was exposed, she would dissolve into tears, transforming from the aggressor into a fragile porcelain doll that needed protecting. She threw herself at my mother's feet, grabbing her hands, her face streaked with mascara. Mom, you have to believe me, she sobbed, her voice hitching in a way that used to break my heart, but now just made me check my watch. I did not know about the loan details. Connor told me he handled everything. I just wanted us to be a family again. I just wanted everyone to be together in a nice house. I did not know he was hurting Tasha. I am a victim here too. My mother looked down at her golden child, her face a mask of conflict. Old habits die hard. For 30 years, her instinct had been to shield Brianna and blame me. She reached out a trembling hand to stroke Brianna's hair. See, Tasha, my mother whispered, looking at me with pleading eyes. She did not know. It was Connor. He tricked all of us. Brianna is innocent. She is just a girl who loves her family. I felt a surge of nausea. Innocent. The woman who wore my clothes, drank my wine, and threw my grandmother's quilt in the trash was innocent. The woman who stood by while her husband destroyed my walls was innocent. I looked at the iPad in my hand. It was time to play the ace. It was time to burn the fantasy to the ground. You really think she is innocent, Mom? I asked, my voice deadly calm. You really think she did not know about the plan to steal my equity? Yes, my mother insisted, pulling Brianna closer. She would never do that to her own sister. I walked over to the television again. I tapped the screen, bringing up the media player connected to the security system. I scrolled to a file dated 3 days ago. The timestamp was 11 p.m. The location was the living room. Then let us listen to what innocence sounds like, I said. I pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. The high-fidelity microphones I had installed, disguised as smoke detectors, picked up every whisper. Brianna's voice filled the room, loud and sharp. Mom is so stupid she will sign anything if you tell her it is for the family. My mother froze. Her hand stopped stroking Brianna's hair. Brianna stopped crying instantly, her head snapping up to look at the speakers. The recording continued. Connor's voice laughed. Yeah, but what about Tasha? What if she checks the title? Brianna's voice again dripping with contempt. Tasha is too busy trying to be a boss babe in Seattle. She throws money at us to make herself feel better because she knows nobody actually likes her. Besides, by the time she finds out, we will have flipped that crypto investment. We will take the 100 grand, double it, and then we can buy that mansion in Grosse Pointe. This dump is just a stepping stone, Connor. Once we get the money, we can let the bank foreclose on this place. Let Tasha deal with the ruin. She can afford it. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I looked at my mother. She was not moving. She was staring at the top of Brianna's head as if she was holding a stranger. The daughter she had idolized, the daughter she had protected at my expense, had just called her stupid. She had just admitted to planning the foreclosure of their home. She had just admitted that she viewed my mother not as a parent, but as a useful idiot. Mom, Brianna whispered, pulling away. That was taken out of context. We were just joking. We were drunk. My mother slowly stood up. She pushed Brianna away from her. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had signed the fraudulent loan, the hands that had cooked 1,000 meals for a daughter who despised her. You called me stupid, my mother whispered. Her voice was hollow. You said you would let the bank take the house. You would let your father and me be homeless. Brianna scrambled up from the floor, wiping her face. No, we would have taken you with us to the mansion. There is no mansion, I shouted, my voice cutting through her lies. There is only a gambling debt and a hole in my wall. I turned to Connor. He was standing by the window, looking like a trapped rat. The realization of what had just happened was dawning on him. The recording proved conspiracy. It proved intent to defraud. And you, I said to him. You stood there and let her talk about your mother-in-law like that. Connor's eyes darted around the room. He saw the security guard blocking the door. He saw the sheriff outside. He saw his life imploding. And like every narcissist, when the walls close in, he turned on the person closest to him. He pointed a shaking finger at Brianna. It was her idea, he yelled. She is the one who wanted the lifestyle. She is the one who nagged me every day about why we were not rich yet. She told me to get the loan. She said her mom was a pushover. Connor, Brianna shrieked. Shut up. No, I won't shut up, Connor screamed back, his face turning red. You useless, greedy woman. You dragged me into this. I told you Tasha would find out. But you said Tasha was too desperate for our approval to check the books. You said she was a pathetic, ATM machine. This is your fault. My father stood up then. He walked over to Connor. He did not hit him. He just looked at him with a disgust so profound it was almost tangible. Get out of my sight, my father said. I looked at the three of them. The family unit that had excluded me for so long was now devouring itself. It was ugly. It was tragic. And it was over. I unplugged the iPad. You heard the recording, I said, addressing the room. That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud. I have the evidence. I have the motive. And I have the confession. I looked at Brianna. So here is the deal. You have two choices. Choice A is that I hand this recording to the district attorney. You and Connor go to prison for a minimum of 5 years. Baby Jack goes into the foster care system because mom and dad are legally homeless and cannot take custody. Brianna gasped, clutching her chest. You wouldn't. He is your nephew. I continued, my voice cold. Choice B is that you leave, right now. You take your husband, you take your lies, and you get out of my house. You sign a document admitting to the debt, forcing Connor to take sole responsibility for that loan, so the bank goes after him and not this property. And you never ask me for a single dollar again. I looked at my watch. You have 5 minutes to decide, prison or poverty. Pick one. Brianna looked at Connor. He was refusing to look at her. She looked at Mom. Mom was staring at the wall, catatonic. We will go, Brianna whispered. She looked at me with pure hatred. I hope you rot in this house, Tasha. I hope you die alone with your money. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. I would rather die alone in a house I own than live with people who would sell me for parts, I said. Get packing. Connor, realizing he had a chance to escape jail, suddenly found his courage. He straightened his back, puffing out his chest in a last desperate attempt to regain control. He looked at me, then at the sheriff through the window, then back at me. We are not going anywhere tonight, he sneered. Excuse me? I asked. I know the law, Tasha, he said, a smirk returning to his face. Even if the lease is void, we have established residency. We have been here for 7 days. My mail comes here. My driver's license is updated to this address. By Michigan law, we are tenants. You cannot just kick us out in the middle of the night. You have to serve us with a 30-day notice of eviction. We have rights. He crossed his arms, looking triumphant. So we will leave, he continued. In 30 days. Until then, you can get out of our house, or I will sue you for illegal eviction. I looked at him. I looked at the smug satisfaction on his face. He really thought he had me. He thought he could use the legal system he had just violated to protect himself. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Oh, Connor, I said, shaking my head. You really should have finished community college. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not the deed. It was not the spreadsheet. It was a document with a red stamp on the top. You are right about one thing, I said. Tenants have rights. Tenants require 30 days' notice. But there is a loophole. Do you know what it is? He frowned. What, you are not a tenant? I said. You are a threat. I held up the paper. This is an emergency ex parte restraining order signed by Judge Harrison exactly 1 hour ago. I walked closer to him, enjoying the way his eyes widened. When you shoved me on the porch, I said, pointing to my bruised hip. You committed domestic violence. When you destroyed my wall, you committed malicious destruction of property. When I showed the judge the video of you attacking me and the photos of the sledgehammer damage, he granted an immediate protective order. I shoved the paper into his chest. This order bars you from coming within 500 feet of me, or this property effective immediately. It overrides any tenancy rights. It overrides any residency claims, because the law does not let abusers live with their victims. I turned to the window and signaled to Sheriff Miller. The front door opened. The sheriff walked in, followed by 2 officers. They were not smiling. Mr. Williams, the sheriff, said, his hand resting on his cuffs. You have been served with a protective order. You are in violation of that order by being in this room. But, Connor stammered. I just got served. I haven't had time to leave. You had time to threaten the owner, the sheriff said. And since I am also arresting you for the felony destruction of property regarding that load-bearing wall, we are going to skip the leaving part and go straight to the booking part. Connor tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He lunged toward the back door, but Mr. Thorne, the security guard, simply stepped in his path. Connor bounced off the big man's chest like a rubber ball. Officer Jenkins grabbed Connor's arm and spun him around. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. You can't do this, Connor screamed as they dragged him out. Lucille, tell them this is my house. My mother did not look up. She sat frozen on the sofa, a statue of regret. I turned to Brianna. She was standing in the middle of the room, trembling. The restraining order names, you too, I lied. It didn't, but she didn't know that. And even if it didn't, I knew she wouldn't stay without Connor. Get your things, I said. She ran upstairs. I heard the frantic sounds of drawers being ripped open. I followed her up. I stood in the doorway of the guest room. She was trying to stuff her clothes into a suitcase. No, I said. She froze. What? That suitcase is mine, I said. I bought it for my trip to Paris 3 years ago. You borrowed it and never returned it. I pointed to the corner. Use the trash bags. Tasha, please, she begged. It is pouring rain. You threw my cashmere in a trash bag in the rain, I reminded her. I am just returning the favor. It is called Karma Brianna, and it is a bitch. She sobbed, grabbing the black plastic bags I had thrown on the floor. She stuffed her clothes inside blindly. She grabbed the baby monitor. She grabbed a handful of diapers. 5 minutes later, she was standing at the front door holding 2 garbage bags and her crying baby in a carrier. She looked at my mother. Mom, she whispered, are you coming? My mother looked up. She looked at my father, who was standing by the fireplace, his back turned to her. He was refusing to even acknowledge her presence. Harold, my mother said softly. My father did not move. He did not speak. He had made his position clear. He would not house a traitor. My mother looked at me. Tasha, she said, her voice shaking. I cannot let her go out there alone. She has nowhere to go. Connor is in jail. She has the baby. That is her problem, Mom, I said. She is 30 years old. She conspired to rob you. And you are going to choose her again. It is not about choosing my mother, cried, standing up. It is about family. You do not turn your back on family. You turned your back on me, I screamed. Finally, letting the hurt show. You turned your back on me for 10 years. You let them abuse me. And you are still doing it. My mother flinched. She looked at the door where Brianna was waiting. She looked at the warm safe house I had provided. I have to go with her, she whispered. She needs me. I nodded. I felt a piece of my heart break off and die, but it was a clean break. Okay, I said. I walked to the closet and grabbed her coat. I threw it at her. Go, I said. My mother put on her coat. She looked at my father one last time. Harold, please, she said. My father turned around. His face was wet with tears, but his eyes were hard as flint. Goodbye, Lucille, he said. My mother sobbed. She grabbed her purse. She walked to the door and took one of the garbage bags from Brianna. They stepped out into the rain. The wind howled, whipping their hair across their faces. The porch light illuminated the mud, the police cars driving away with Connor, and the bleak reality of their future. I walked to the door. Tasha, my mother said, turning back. When can we come back? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and then sold me for a lie. You can't, I said. I grabbed the handle of the heavy oak door. You are evicted. I slammed the door shut. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I engaged the security bar. Clang. I leaned my forehead against the wood and listened. I heard them crying on the porch. I heard the sound of a car engine starting Brianna's car. I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. And then silence. I turned around. My father was sitting in his chair, his head in his hands. The house was a wreck. There were holes in the walls. There was trash on the floor. But the air was different. The heaviness was gone. The toxicity had been flushed out into the storm. I walked over to my father and sat on the floor beside his chair. I rested my head on his knee, just like I used to when I was a little girl. He put his hand on my head. We are going to be okay, Dad, I whispered. He nodded, stroking my hair. I know, Tasha, he said. I know. We sat there in the quiet house, 2 survivors in the wreckage, listening to the rain wash the world clean. It was the end of the family we were born into, but it was the beginning of the family we were choosing to be. The silence that descended upon the house after the door clicked shut was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing down on the dust motes dancing in the beam of the porch light that cut through the front window. The chaos of the last hour, the screaming, the sirens, the accusations, all of it had evaporated, leaving behind a stillness that felt like the bottom of a deep ocean. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still resting on the cold brass of the deadbolt, breathing in the scent of the house. It no longer smelled like home. It smelled of violation. It smelled of the drywall dust that coated my tongue and the stale residue of people who had taken everything and given nothing. I turned slowly to face the living room. My father, Harold, was still sitting in his armchair. He had not moved. He looked like a statue carved from grief, his hands resting on his knees, his head bowed so low that his chin touched his chest. The only sign of life was the slight tremble of his shoulders. I walked over to him, my own limp more pronounced now that the adrenaline was fading. I sat down on the floor beside his chair, ignoring the debris and the stains on the rug. I rested my head on his knee, a gesture from a childhood that felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. "Dad," I whispered. The sound of my voice broke the dam. A sob ripped through his chest, a harsh, jagged sound that seemed to tear at his throat. He covered his face with his weathered hands, hands that had worked 40 years in a factory to buy this house, hands that had fixed my bicycle and held me when I scraped my knees. Now they were shaking with a shame so profound it made my heart ache. "I am so sorry, Tasha," he wept, his voice muffled by his palms. "I am so sorry." I knew. I knew what they were doing to you, and I did nothing. "You did not know about the loan, Dad," I said softly, reaching up to touch his arm. "You did not know about the fraud." I knew about the cruelty, he choked out, lowering his hands to look at me. His eyes were red and swollen, filled with a lifetime of unspoken regrets. "I saw how your mother treated you. I saw how she looked at Brianna like she was the sun, and looked at you like you were a shadow. I saw how you worked yourself into the ground to pay our bills, and instead of thanking you, she just asked for more. And I sat there, Tasha. I sat in this chair and I read my newspaper and I let it happen." He took a deep breath, the air rattling in his lungs. "I told myself I was keeping the peace," he continued. "I told myself that Lucille had a hard life, that she just wanted the best for the girls. But that was a lie. I was a coward. I was afraid of her anger. I was afraid of being alone. I let my fear make me complicit in your abuse. I watched my own daughter being cannibalized by the people who were supposed to protect her, and I just closed my eyes." "Dad, stop," I said, tears pricking my own eyes. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "A man does not let his child be the sacrifice for his own comfort. When Connor pushed you down those stairs, Tasha, something in me snapped. I looked at him, and I looked at your mother defending him, and I realized that I had been living in a house of strangers. You are the only one who ever truly loved us. You are the only one who sacrificed, and we paid you back with betrayal." He looked around the ruined living room, his gaze lingering on the hole in the wall, the trash, the empty spaces where our family photos used to hang. "This house," he whispered. "I used to be so proud of this house. I thought it was my legacy. But it is not a legacy. It is a trap. It is a monument to everything we did wrong." I followed his gaze. He was right. I had spent 10 years and $500,000 trying to save this structure, thinking that if I just fixed the roof or paid the mortgage or renovated the kitchen, I could fix the family inside it. I thought that if I made the house perfect, maybe my mother would finally love me. Maybe Brianna would finally respect me. But you cannot renovate a rot that goes down to the foundation. The walls were sturdy, but the love inside them was condemned. I made a decision then, a decision that came with the clarity of a balance sheet resolving itself. "We are not staying here, Dad," I said. He looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" I stood up, wincing as my hip protested, and walked over to the mantel. I picked up the framed photo of me and Dad from my college graduation, one of the few things Connor hadn't destroyed. "I am selling it," I said. "Selling the house," Dad asked. "But Tasha, this is your investment. You put everything into this." "That is exactly why I have to let it go," I said, turning to face him. "This house is toxic, Dad. It is filled with ghosts and bad memories. If we stay here, every time we look at that wall, we will see Connor. Every time we walk into the kitchen, we will hear Mom defending him. I cannot heal here, and neither can you." "But the loan," he said, panic rising in his voice. "That $100,000 loan Connor took out. The lien. I have a plan for that." I said, my voice switching back to business mode. I could sue them. I could drag this out in court for 2 years fighting to prove the signature was forged. I would win, eventually. But in the meantime, the interest would pile up, the legal fees would drain me, and we would be tied to them. We would have to see them in depositions. We would have to listen to their lies. I do not want that. I want a clean break. I walked over to where my bag lay on the floor. I will sell the house to a developer, I said. The market is hot. Even with the damage, the land value alone is significant. I will use the proceeds to pay off Connor's fraudulent loan immediately. I will clear the title. I will wipe the slate clean. I will lose money, yes. I will walk away with a fraction of what I put in. But I will walk away with my sanity, and I will walk away with you. I reached into the side pocket of my bag and pulled out a glossy folder. I had picked it up at the airport in Seattle days ago, a wishful thought that I hadn't dared to voice until now. I walked back to my father and handed him the folder. He opened it, his trembling fingers smoothing the cover. Pictures of a modern glass-walled building surrounded by pine trees and mountains smiled back at him. Emerald Heights, Senior Living, he read aloud. Seattle, Washington. It is 5 blocks from my apartment building, I said, sitting down on the arm of his chair. It is not a nursing home, Dad. It is a community. They have a woodworking shop. They have a fishing club that goes out on the Sound every Saturday. They have a poker night. I watched his face as he looked at the pictures. I saw a flicker of something that had been missing for a long time. Hope. I have a guest room in my apartment, I continued. You can stay with me for as long as you want. But I thought maybe you would like your own space eventually. A place where nobody tells you you are useless. A place where you can just be Harold. He looked up at me, tears spilling over onto his cheeks again. You want me to come with you? He asked, his voice barely audible. After everything I let happen, you still want your old man around. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. Dad, I said, resting my cheek against his rough flannel shirt. You are the only family I have left. Of course I want you. I cannot do this without you. He broke down then, sobbing into my shoulder, holding on to me like I was a lifeline in a storm. We sat there for a long time, the only 2 people left in the wreckage of 450 Oak Street. Outside, the rain finally began to slow the clouds breaking to reveal a sliver of moon. Inside, the decision was made. The house was just wood and brick. We were the foundation, and we were moving west. 6 months later, the air in Seattle smelled of salt water and cedar, a sharp, clean scent that felt like freedom. I stood on the balcony of my apartment watching a ferry cut a white wake across the deep blue of Elliott Bay. The morning sun was bright, reflecting off the glass towers of the city. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the silence. My phone rested on the railing, silent. No frantic texts asking for money. No guilt-tripping voicemails. Just the calm notifications of my work calendar and a weather alert promising a perfect day. The last 6 months had been a blur of logistics, the kind I excelled at. I had sold the house in Detroit to a cash buyer in 2 weeks. I paid off the predatory lender, taking a grim satisfaction in the silence on the other end of the line when I wired the funds and told them to never contact me again. I packed up what little was worth saving, my grandmother's urn, a few photo albums, Dad's tools, and I left the rest. I left the furniture. I left the memories. I signed the closing papers electronically from my office in Seattle and never looked back. Justice, I learned, is a slow grinder, but it grinds exceedingly fine. I picked up my phone and opened the local Detroit news app, a habit I was trying to break, but still indulged in occasionally. There was a small article in the Crime Beat section. Connor Williams, 32, pleaded guilty yesterday to charges of wire fraud and malicious destruction of property. In exchange for the plea, the grand larceny charges were dropped, but he was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility and ordered to pay restitution. I smiled. Restitution he would never be able to pay. He was bankrupt. His real estate empire was exposed as a shell game of maxed out credit cards and loans taken out in other people's names. He would come out of prison a felon with a credit score of 0. And Brianna. I closed the news app and opened my blocked messages folder. It was a digital graveyard of desperation. Tasha. Please, I need help with rent. Tasha, the baby needs formula. Tasha. I am working at a grocery store. Do you know how embarrassing this is? The golden child had finally hit reality. Without Connor's schemes and without my funding, Brianna had crashed hard. She was living in a studio apartment in a rough part of town, working the checkout counter at a discount supermarket. I had heard through a distant cousin that she had been fired from her first 2 jobs for attitude problems. Apparently, telling customers they were lucky to be served by her did not go over well. She was learning dollar by painful dollar what it actually meant to work for a living. I had set up a small anonymous trust for baby Jack essential supplies sent directly to his daycare, so Brianna couldn't return them for cash, but that was it. She was on her own. And Lucille. My mother was the tragedy of the story. She was living in a senior-subsidized housing complex, isolated and bitter. She called Dad's old number incessantly, leaving voicemails on a phone that was now disconnected. She told anyone who would listen that her ungrateful daughter had stolen her house and kidnapped her husband. But nobody was listening anymore. The neighbors knew the truth. The church members knew the truth. A narcissist without an audience is just a person shouting into a void. I put the phone down. The past was a closed book. The present was waiting. I walked back inside and grabbed my keys and a cooler. Ready to go, I called out. My father walked out of the guest room. He looked 10 years younger. The stoop was gone from his shoulders. He was wearing a new fishing vest and a baseball cap that said, Seattle Mariners. His eyes were clear and his skin had a healthy glow. Born ready, he grinned, picking up his tackle box. The guys at the club said the trout are biting down by Lake Washington today. We took the elevator down, chatting about the Mariners' pitching lineup. We walked to my car, not a rental, but my own clean paid-off SUV. We drove through the city, the windows down, letting the cool air rush over us. When we got to the lake, the water was like glass. We found a quiet spot on the pier, away from the crowds. Dad baited his hook with the patience of a man who had nowhere else he needed to be. He cast his line the reel, singing a high, thin note as it flew over the water. We sat there for hours. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable. It was the silence of 2 people who had walked through fire and come out the other side, carrying only what mattered. I watched him. I watched the way he smiled at the water. I watched the peace that had settled over him now that he was no longer walking on eggshells, terrified of his wife's rage. He had found his voice again here among the mountains and the water. He had made friends. He had joined a choir. He was living the life he had sacrificed for 40 years. Tasha, he said, keeping his eyes on the bobber. Yeah, Dad. Thank you, he said simply, for saving me. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You saved yourself, Dad, I said. I just drove the getaway car. He laughed, a rich, deep sound that echoed across the water. People always say that blood is thicker than water. They say family is everything. They use those words as chains to bind you to people who hurt you, people who drain you, people who would break your walls just to see you crumble. But as I sat there watching the sun dip lower over the Olympic mountains, I realized the truth. Blood is just biology. Family is a choice. It is the people who respect your boundaries. It is the people who celebrate your success without jealousy. It is the people who stand up for you when you are pushed down. I had lost a mother and a sister. I had lost a house that I thought defined me. But I had found my father, and more importantly, I had found myself. I looked out at the vast open water. The bobber dipped. I got one, Dad shouted, reeling it in his face, lighting up with pure joy. I grabbed the net. I got it. Dad, I laughed. Bring him in. We were a team. We were free. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fixing a disaster. I was just fishing. The screen fades to black. The sound of gentle waves lapping against the shore plays, followed by the soft click of a fishing reel. Tasha's journey reminds us that family is a title earned through respect, not a lifetime pass for abuse. For years, she confused financial support with love, only to realize that to her mother and sister, she was merely a resource to be harvested. True liberation began only when she stopped paying the price for their affection and started investing in her own peace. Walking away from blood relatives wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. We must learn that cutting off toxic ties is not abandonment. It is the highest form of self-love and the only path to genuine freedom. If you have ever had to choose your peace over your family's expectations, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to evict a toxic person from your life to save yourself? I want to hear your story.